Hello everyone, I'm Jan Angel, your 26th District State Representative. Thank you for joining me on Legislative Update. Well, it's pretty much a sure thing that the legislature will be going into a special session. And it's very unfortunate because the majority party has had 105 days in which to complete its business, including passing the state's operating, transportation, and capital construction budgets for the next biennium. My House Republican colleagues and I were ready from the beginning of the session in January to address our state's budget challenges and to make the difficult decisions that you sent us here to make. It was frustrating because no real action on the operating budget began until after the quarterly revenue forecast was released on March 17th. But even then, we didn't see a budget released until nearly 20 days later. On March 28th, reporter Brad Shannon from The Olympian wrote, and I quote, "House budget writers are slipping from their schedule for releasing a 2-year budget at the state capitol in Olympia, and signs of movement are getting slower and slower," end of quote. Brad Shannon's headline was telling. It asked, quote, "Is budget paralysis setting in at the Capitol?" End of quote. Finally, the House Democrats released a proposed budget on April 4th. That still should have given plenty of time to reach a compromise before the end of the regular session. The House Republican colleagues also released our own version of the operating budget. Our lead Republican on the House Ways and Means Committee, Representative Gary Alexander, called it a go-home budget because it was, in his words, responsible, accountable, and reflects the economic realities facing our families, taxpayers, and employers across the state. It was a budget that would have responsibly addressed the state's budget shortfall, and it could have been adopted in time to finish up the regular session. Rather, the majority party set it aside and passed their budget over to the Senate. So for nearly the last 2 weeks, we've been waiting now for the Senate to take action. Unfortunately, that's given at least 14 Senate Democrats time to introduce measures that would increase taxes. As I've noted on this program in the past, voters said no, not once in November, but 3 times against tax increases. We need to respect their wishes and pass a budget within existing revenues. When they didn't schedule us to work this past weekend, it became pretty apparent that the majority in both the House and the Senate had given up on trying to finish the 105-day session on time. So now we're voting on just a few bills a day as time runs out on this regular session. You may ask, why is this important? When the legislature is in session, it costs taxpayers about $16,000 a day. With such a budget shortfall, every dime counts, and we've had plenty of time to finish our business. The lack of leadership to keep this legislature on task and on time has been very disappointing. It's my hope that if the governor calls a special session, she keeps only the budget negotiators in Olympia and sends the rest of the legislature home until an agreement is reached. That would be the most cost-effective way of resolving our budget problems. So stay tuned and we'll see what happens. I do have some good news to report. The governor has signed my bill that allows local governments to choose 4- or 6-year terms for their planning commissioners. The current law has restricted those terms to 6 years. However, our local cities were having a hard time recruiting people for that long a period. That's why the Port Orchard City Council asked me to sponsor this bill. So I'm glad that we can provide our municipalities with the flexibility they need. I also want to remind you that my district office will be opening soon in the South Kitsap Mall on the 2nd floor of the South Kitsap Town Square Mall. That's located at 1700 Southeast Mile Hill Drive. I encourage you to visit us. In the meantime, you can contact me here from my website that you'll find right here on the address on your screen. Thank you again for joining me on Legislative Update. I'm your State Representative, Jan Angel.